Hello everyone, it's Quick Flash, and today I'm going to have a Quick Flash rant. It's going to be a new kind of series I do every once in a while when I feel like it. I am going to rant about something in the hobby. Today I've got a rant about different flight control softwares. I'm going to go over the pros and cons that I think each of them have. Now, do be warned, I am a Emu Flight developer, so this is a biased view. And, take it for what it's worth. But I don't really care that it's biased. I still think I have a good overall grounding on all the softwares. Anyways, I hope this isn't too biased and you can enjoy. So, up first we have KISS. Some of the pros that KISS has is it's got a pretty solid ecosystem with its KISS flight controllers and KISS speed controllers. It's got overall good flight characteristics. They have a pretty solid development team. And they also have a pretty slow development, which means that the things that come in will be solid. There won't be a ton of new stuff added all at once. You won't have to relearn everything. And it's just overall a pretty good system. The main cons that KISS has is its price, its OSD. Yeah, its price. It's a lot more expensive than other options out there. For instance, the KISS V2 flight controller is about $70. You pair that with the KISS speed controllers and the OSD board that they have, and you're looking at about $200. Whereas you could get the same functionality for about $60 with Betaflight. The other cons, their OSD. You have to use a separate hardware to get OSD. Their flight controller does not support OSD out of the box. It doesn't have a chip for that, which is a massive pain. It's 2020. Why don't you have that, KISS? Come on. Then they have a slow development, which is also a con because there's not a ton of changes, like the OSD still isn't implemented. Then the hardware is not necessarily the most solid. I still hear of people having some hardware issues with it. That's probably been worked out now. I've never actually flown KISS, so this is why I put it first because I don't know the most about it. But I'd say that their team's doing good stuff. They've recently added stuff like GPS for long range stuff, and return to home things. So they've got good stuff in the works. A whoop board I've also heard about, which will be really helpful for KISS. But yeah, a lot of people swear by it. I've never used it just because it costs so much. If KISS could get its price down, it would be a lot more worthwhile, I think. If it was around Betaflight price, I would have tried it by now. And yeah, however, it's quite a bit more expensive, so it's not really for me. It just costs too much. But a lot of people swear by it, so I'm totally cool with that. Next up, we have Falco X, our other closed source software. The main pros of Falco X is it's the easiest software to use. It's the best out of box. It's got a great ecosystem, and it has fast development. And now what I mean by easiest to use is you can build your drone, and once you finish soldering it, in about 5 minutes you can be up and flying it. It has just the best way of setting up your drone. It uses the OSD, and within less than 5 minutes, all of your setup is done. Using the OSD, the motor mapping, the receiver, everything, setting up your UARTs, all that is done in the OSD. First time you plug in, it's incredible. It's really great, to be honest. And so that really helps give you the best out-of-box solution. They also have preset tunes in the OSD, so you can easily switch what tune you're using. It's incredible. And then they do have a fast-paced development. Some of the major cons with Falco X is it's hard to get their hardware. People have been waiting months for their H7 flight controller. They announced it early 2020, and they just barely started sending them out to people. And during that whole time, it's been hard for people to get any Flight 1 flight controllers. And all of 2019 was a hard year for getting Flight 1 hardware. So just getting Flight 1 hardware is a challenge. A real challenge. They really need to sort that out. And they said that with the H7 coming out now, that they should have sorted that out for the future. Hopefully they've told the truth. Otherwise, they might lose more pilots. Like 2019, they lost quite a few pilots just because they couldn't get their hardware, and they switched over to Flight 1 because they needed reliable hardware to fly, and they couldn't get any Flight 1 hardware. The next con I have listed is drama. Falco X developers will sometimes go out of their way to cause drama, which I don't think is super cool. They've been doing it less than they used to. It used to be a lot worse. They're probably learning, but not a huge fan of that. It's been getting better. I've not really seen Wild Willie ever do that, ever cause any drama, but that is a downside. Another downside is just sometimes it doesn't work. For instance, I had a quad. It's really odd. The flight controller is mounted horizontally. Not horizontally, it's mounted vertically instead of horizontally. And I just could not get that to fly. It would just wobble uncontrollably. I then stuck the, I then updated to Betaflight, and I could suddenly fly the drone again. So it works for most people, and I've had some good out-of-box experiences with it. I've also had some times where it just didn't work. The price, though, on everything is comparable to Betaflight stuff, so that's totally fine on how much it costs. And another pro with Falco X is you can easily use any of their hardware with Betaflight. So if you try their stuff and you don't like it, you can then flash Betaflight, and you're not really out much because it doesn't really cost you more than Betaflight gear does. So that is pretty cool. But yeah, my overall view of Falco X is it's definitely the best out of the box. I think more software needs to take a look at what Falco X has done and try to simplify things, make things better, because they really have their ease of use part of the software down to a T. They really do. Up next, we have Silverware. It was originally made to fly toy drones from like Walmart. People were hacking into Walmart drones, making those flyable. And eventually they kept working on it. It became its own software. They started making flight controllers for it, and Silverware was born. Some of the pros is it's really cheap. You can buy from Newbie Drone a tiny whoop for $50 that runs Silverware. It's a brushed whoop, really competitive in whoop racing, really solid drone, $50. Not bad, really. Like, that's pretty cheap for a solid competitive drone. They also have a solid list of developers. You talk to any of them, they're very helpful, really good. They're all great guys to work with. And then, like I said, Silverware, it's great for whoops. A lot of the top whoop pilots use Silverware and nothing else just because it's their favorite. The cons, though, it's hard to use. They don't have a GUI. It's hard to set up, and it requires hacking. These kind of all fit into each other. If you want to do anything with the code, you have to recompile it. You can't just change things willy-nilly. You can't change your motor mapping or your prop direction in a GUI. You have to recompile the code so that it does things that way. So that is a bit of a pain. However, Silverware is working to fix that. They have a fork of Silverware called Quicksilver. It's not out yet. It's still closed source, but it ports Silverware over to F4 flight controllers and just overall works even better than Silverware. So when that comes out, it'll be awesome. Right now, I wouldn't really recommend Silverware because a lot of the advancements that they've made I have pushed into Emu Flight. So if you want some of those whoop advancements or other things, I would recommend giving Emu Flight a try because you don't have some of the same cons that you do with difficulty of setting up and whatnot that you have with Silverware. But overall, it's a great software. I like the direction that it's headed with Quicksilver. The developers are solid. They're really great guys. If you're interested in this, hop on their Discord. It's the Alien Whoop Discord, and ask them some questions. They're great guys. They'll help set you up. And overall, I have quite a positive view of Silverware and the upcoming Quicksilver. I just wish it was easier to use. Up next, we have Inav. It's a fork of CleanFlight. It took a more autonomous route to CleanFlight than Betaflight did. It's focused more on fixed wing and autonomous code. So if you're ever looking at doing fixed wing or autonomous stuff, definitely look to Inav. Don't look at Betaflight or Emu Flight. Flight performance of Inav has also gotten way better in recent builds. Before, people would complain that they could never quite get it to fly as good as Betaflight, but recently that has been fixed in many ways, and it also works with a lot of flight controllers. A lot of Betaflight flight controllers do support Inav. Some of the cons, though, there's no turtle mode support, which for a lot of people is a deal breaker. Not all Betaflight flight controllers are supported either, and it still probably doesn't fly as good as some of the other options out there. Flies a lot better, still probably not as good. But I could be wrong about that. I don't have a ton of experience. I have some. I've used it a little bit. But one of the pros with their flight performance is they've actually added the IMUF Kalman filter from Emu Flight. They've implemented that and called it the unicorn filter, just because there's been some drama around the Kalman filter, so they called it the unicorn filter, and they just really like the way that it works. So that's helped their flight performance, along with some other changes they've done. And overall, if you're looking to do more autonomous stuff, definitely give Inav a try. If Emu Flight or Betaflight isn't quite working for you, I would give Inav a try. See if it just works on your build. Overall, I like the direction Inav is headed. They're continuing to do new things and work on more autonomous code and more fixed wing code. So, there's still a solid option. And if you don't want to do the deep dive into Ardu Copter or PX4, this is a great option as well, instead of, taking that deep dive. And it's a much easier way to get into autonomous code. Up next, we have Betaflight. Betaflight is by far the largest of all the softwares. It has the most users by a long shot. Along with that, it also has the largest amount of flight controller support, the largest dev team, and the biggest community. So that means that if you want to go fly and you need help, you've got a big community that you can reach to for help. Lots of YouTube guides, Facebook groups, they have a Slack. There's lots of places you can go to get help with Betaflight. It's just the biggest, so it has a lot of resources like that. Some of the cons, though, is there are a lot of knobs in the software. There's feed forward, iTerm relax, anti-gravity, and a whole host of other things going on, which gets to a point where some people think it's just too much and they don't like it. Definitely KISS, Inav, and Flight 1 are more simple when it comes to just the base multi-rotor flight code. Betaflight is much more advanced and a bit, some people find it more tricky. Another con, they kind of go together, the community and devs, is, the Betaflight community is a little bit toxic, and in my opinion, saying this from my opinion, I think that a bit of that comes from the developers and how they treat users and, stuff like that. I've seen quite a few people just trying to ask for help or help others, and they've been, in my opinion, really attacked by these developers for things they really shouldn't have been attacked for, and it's a real shame. But I think that, in my opinion, really the biggest issue with Betaflight has to do with their development community. I think it's toxic personally, and I think that that's kind of their biggest crutch right now, is that. So my view of Betaflight, without Betaflight there wouldn't be Emu Flight. So I'm very, happy that there is Betaflight. They've done lots of great things. They've added unified targets, which has been a great bit of code. They've added support for lots of things, H7 flight controllers. They've pushed a lot of code. They've done a whole lot of things to move the hobby forward. Without Betaflight, the hobby would not be where it was. And so I very much so respect Betaflight. And they have a lot of really solid developers that know what they're doing. I just don't quite think that their developers treat their users, or even other developers, very kindly. It's kind of, in my opinion, toxic. So, if you can take away the development community and that sort of stuff within Betaflight and you enjoy all the knobs that they have, it's a great option. There's lots of help, lots of guides online, lots of ways you can tune your quad, lots of stuff you can do, and it's overall, with their 4.2 release, it's quite solid now. It's a pretty good system, and, I don't think you'll be too disappointed with it, So, that's kind of my overview of Betaflight. Up next, we have the last guy on the list. That is Emu Flight. He's the newest guy on the block. Some of the pros that I've listed is we've got the IMUF filter, which Inav has as well. Emu Flight has a fast development pace. We're coming out with things pretty quickly. And a lot of that is based on user feedback. We really listen to what users are saying, use that to implement new things. We work on most flight controllers, on almost all of them. Just a few new flight controllers we don't work with, and H7. Aside from that, we support pretty much every flight controller on the market. Another incredible thing about Emu Flight is presets. In the GUI, you have access to presets, and you can choose different pilots presets or different presets for different kinds of quadcopters. And the whole deal with presets is it'll set up your PIDs and your filters to give you a better flight experience than perhaps the defaults will. And the idea with that is, the defaults can't cover every quad, but we can have presets that can help to give a better flight experience for a wider range of quads by having various presets that are more similar to that. Then another pro I really think with Emu Flight is that it has a solid future. Ever since the start of Emu Flight, it's been growing. Emu Flight is now sponsored by a few companies, and we actually are working with a few companies to get products made, to get cool stuff done. So I think that Emu Flight has quite a solid future ahead of it. Some of the cons, though, is it does have a smaller development team, and a lot of the developers, don't have as much programming experience as, say, some of the Betaflight developers. Us Emu Flight guys, we're just doing it as a hobby. None of us write C code for a living or do stuff like this for a living. It's all a hobby for us. So there's definitely people with more coding experience. We're getting there, though. Another con is we don't have unified targets, so getting target support is a bit of a pain when a new flight controller comes out. It won't instantly work with Emu Flight. It takes a little bit of time for us to support it. And another con is, people on Facebook or other places will, potentially call you a flat earther or tell you that you can't tune because you like Emu Flight. They'll go around saying that you're a flat earther, or you can't tune. If you could tune, you'd use Betaflight because you can fly better if you just tune. But I really disagree with that. But it's something that I've run into. I've been called a flat earther by quite a few different people, mainly just Betaflight developers or influential users. And I've seen other Betaflight users called this, not Betaflight, other Emu Flight users called the same thing by others. So, it's a real shame to see that. I'm not a huge fan of that. There's just already too much drama in the drone community. But, thought I'd just mention that because I'm tired of it. Why can't we just get along? That's part of the reason why I'm making this video is I want to show that, I think there's good stuff in all the firmwares out there, and that, if you don't fly Emu Flight, I'm not going to hate you. If you just come out of the gun hating on Emu Flight for no reason, that's not cool. But you can have your own reasons. But moving on, why do I personally develop Emu Flight? And the real reason does have to do with the Betaflight developers. Back in 2018, I used to fly Flight 1. Well, not in 2018. In 2018, I flew some Flight 1, I flew Helio, and I flew some Betaflight. Out of those three, I preferred Helio the most. So that's what I stuck with, is Helio. Helio went out of business, as you all know, and there's a lot of drama. I'm really tired of all that drama, but there's a lot of drama. They went out of business, and when they did, they open sourced their flight code. And as such, that flight code was then added to a fork of Betaflight, which later turned into Emu Flight. When that happened, when that IMUF filter was added to Betaflight, I hopped on the train and started helping develop the code. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't you just add that code to Betaflight? Well, Betaflight absolutely hated Helio and wanted nothing to do with them, nothing to do with their code. and as such, they just wouldn't accept any any code that came from Helio. Maybe they would now, given that there's been over 2 years for things to settle down, but back when Emu Flight started, things were still too fresh, and there was no way that would have happened. And so I continue to develop Emu Flight because I can push things that the Betaflight developers may not have such a high opinion of, or things that they might not want to do. Like, I'm not sure if Betaflight even wants presets in their code. I think that might be something that they frown upon, because it's been asked for years and it's never seen the light of day. It's really, I just enjoy the freedom that developing Emu Flight versus Betaflight brings. I'm working hard to try and keep the Emu Flight development community really positive and encouraging, and trying to keep toxicity away from it. And really my goal with Emu Flight is to make it work as good as possible and just try to help as many people have a good experience in the hobby as they can. So that's really my review of all the different firmwares out there. Emu Flight is by far my favorite, and I really do think that it has a solid future ahead of it. With the version 1.0.0 release that we're working on, that'll add support for everything that Betaflight has that Emu Flight is missing, as we will be rebasing the Emu Flight code off of the latest Betaflight.